All right. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. We are back. We are continuing with our look at the triennial Torah portion. This week, we are going to be continuing with our look at the book of Numbers. We are in Numbers chapter 33. Numbers 33, which deals with the journeys. The journeys. This is an interesting chapter because we see, when we go through this chapter here, we see in this chapter, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I lost count the amount of times that the scripture over says the journey, because it's dealing with the a recount basically of the places, the different places that Israel went through the wilderness on the way to the land of promise. And so it's interesting that when we look at this chapter, it kind of points us and steers us in the direction of kind of similar to last week, with the idea of preparing for the promised land. And so as the people, they got to the place where they're basically right on the other side, we go through these various things that we'll see here, that from a spiritual perspective remind us of what it is that we things that we can use to prepare us for moving forward. And so we'll go ahead, we'll read a little bit of the chapter, and then we'll go from there. We have some things that we want to add to the reading, just so that we could gain a greater understanding. So we'll go ahead now and we'll read the first 15 verses, 1 through 15 in Numbers chapter 33. So let me go ahead and pull up the verses here. I'm going to go ahead and read that. Nice and loud.
And it says, "These are the departures of the children of Israel who went out of the land of Mitzrayim by their divisions under the hand of Moshe and Aaron. And Moshe wrote down the starting points of their departures at the mouth of Yahweh. And these are their departures according to their starting points. So they departed from Ramses, in the first new moon, on the 15th day of the first new moon, on the morrow of the Pesach. The children of Israel went out with boldness before the eyes of the Mitzrites. And the Mitzrites were burying all their firstborn, whom Yahweh had stricken among them. Also on their mighty ones Yahweh had executed judgments. Then the children of Israel departed from Ramses and camped at Sukkot. And they departed from Sukkot and camped at Etham, which is on the edge of the wilderness. And they departed from Ethon and turned back to Pi Hahiroth, which is east of Baal Zephon, and they camped near Migdol. And they departed from before Hahiroth and passed over through the midst of the sea into the wilderness, went 3 days' journey in the wilderness of Ethon, and camped at Marah. And they departed from Marah, and they came to Elim, and at Elim were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees. So they camped there. And they departed from Elim and camped by the Sea of Reeds. And they departed from the Sea of Reeds and camped in the wilderness of Sin. And they departed from the wilderness of Sin and camped at Dovka. And they departed from Dovka and camped at Alush. And they departed from Alush and camped at Rephidim. And there was no water for the people to drink. And they departed from Rephidim and camped in the wilderness of Sinai.
Okay, very good. All right, so it's interesting. It's interesting that when we look at this thing, first of all, that the Most High had commanded for Moses to write down and to recall, to remember these starting points of their departures. This version says departures, or they departed. Some versions say journey. Let's see here if we look. At this here, hold on 1 second. Let me just. King James translates that as the journeys. And that word there, Masa, which means a departure from the striking the tents or the breaking down of the tents. Right? And so when we just think about, coming and going, but again, we have to remember that they were journeying, they were breaking down the tents, and they were camping, they were staying, they were pitching their tents. So basically, when it says that they, let's see here, like verse 5, where it says that they departed, or they journeyed, or they broke down their tents from this place, because they talk about the place that they left from, and then they camped in this place, which means they set up, or they built up their tents, right, or they pitched their tents. And so when we think about that, it causes us to really think about all of the things that are included in the entire process. You have the idea of actually moving to a place, setting up your tent when you get to the place, and all that entails, all the things that happen while you're there, and then breaking your tent back down and then leaving out. Right? I can say that I went to a place, I stayed in the tent, and then I left. But when you really think about, just saying that, there's a lot of things in between that, that happen, that, these unspoken things. Right? And so there's a reason that, we look at this, and the Most High instructs Moses to recall these events, because of all of the memories, the things that go along with the process. When you look at this whole chapter here, we looked at verses 1 through 15, which essentially is the journey from Egypt to Mount Sinai. And so when we think about, the idea of, Israel traveling from Egypt to Mount Sinai, we have to think about, the escape, right? The deliverance that happened from Egypt, and all that is included in that. And so, again, when we think about what the Moshe has done in order to get his people from Egypt, we just read to the 15th chapter up until the, what happened at Sinai, which we know is the giving of the commandments. These scriptures here don't talk to us about, what happened at Sinai, right? Just says they went there and camped in the wilderness. They just went and camped in the wilderness of Sinai, right? But we know while they was in Sinai, that's Mount Sinai, that's where the commandments were given. And so the very fact that the Most High goes back and begins to speak about these things that happened or the places where they journeyed is something that, he's doing again as the people are right on the edge of the promised land, about to go in. And so preparing the people to go into the promised land, the Most High reminds the people where they've been. He reminds the people what they've been through and what it is that he actually has brought them through. I mean, if you just think about it kind of from a figurative standpoint, they're leaving from this place when they're locked in chains, right? And then they go over into this place where the mountain is, right? They don't go up the mountain, of course, because it's holy. But Moses, he goes up the mountain, right? And so you think about, I think about, when we went to the Grand Tetons and saw the mountains out in Wisconsin or Wyoming or wherever we were at.
Wyoming.
And so, or Montana. No, it was Wyoming.
Yeah.
And so, you stand at the bottom of these mountains and you look up at these huge mountains, from the valley. And it's this big, it's this big, huge place. And so what they did really was kind of go, Mount Sinai really is like a range. It's like a mountain range, right? Where they go through this group of mountains. So you could think about the idea of going into a mountain, going up a mountain, coming down the other side of it, getting down in the valley and walking away from the mountain, and all of the things that just from a spiritual perspective, these things show us, because our life really is that, right? When we have these times of climbing these mountains, we have these various obstacles and things that we climb, these high points, these low points that we go through. And so again, we look at these journeys that are given over here, And this is what it causes us to think about, right? Because this time that was spent in the wilderness is exemplary of our life.
Mm-hmm.
Our life as we proceed towards the land of promise. And so here, let's look at some more of these scriptures over here. Let's pull up 1 Corinthians. First Corinthians 10. All right, let's start reading at verse 1 down through 11.
For I do not wish you to be ignorant, brothers, that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were immersed into Moshe in the cloud and in the sea.
All right, hold on a second. When we look over here, first of all, we see that the apostle, begins with this here, not wishing that these people be ignorant, right? And so in his attempt to keep his brethren from being ignorant, he goes back to the time in the wilderness, right? That our fathers were under the cloud. When we think about the cloud, we're talking about the what the people did in terms of their journey through the wilderness. That was following the cloud, right? If we look at Exodus 13, Exodus 13, read verse 21.
And Yahweh went before them by day in a column of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a column of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night.
So when we think about the idea of the fathers, being under the cloud, we're talking about the fathers following after the spirit of the Most High. Following after the spirit of Elohim. Right? The Ruach HaKodesh. Right? And so when he talks about, I'm going to 1 Corinthians. When he talks about this idea of wishing that these people are not ignorant, he reminds them that we got to be in the spirit, just like the fathers were under the cloud. Okay? And so it talks about being under the cloud and going through the sea. The first thing I thought about when I think about these clouds, it's obviously talking about the clouds that we reference over in Exodus in terms of leading of the cloud. But when I think about a cloud, it's water that's above a cloud is, right? We think about, of course, water, this life sustaining thing, which water is, right? And how that kind of mirrors what the Ruach is for us, right? This life sustaining thing that comes from above, right? Clouds rain down water on us, right? If we are a seed, that water that we receive on us, causes us to grow. And so it's an integral part to our lives and to our everyday existence. And so there's a lot that's being said when we just think about the idea of our fathers being under the cloud, right? Because again, we're speaking from this spiritual perspective of these people that were led by the very presence of the Almighty. right? And they all passed through the sea. So keep on going. Read that verse 2 there.
It says, and all were immersed into Moshe in the cloud and in the sea. And all ate the same spiritual food. And all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank of the spiritual rock that followed, and the rock was Messiah.
Okay, just right there now, Paul is putting Yeshua back there in the wilderness with Israel, right? He talks about this spiritual drink and this spiritual food and this spiritual rock, and the rock was Messiah. And so again, Paul trying to encourage, trying to build up these people over here and be sure that they're not ignorant, is showing them Messiah in the scriptures. Messiah in the so-called Old Testament, in the wilderness with the ancient Israel, with Moses and all of the things that they're going through, showing them that Yeshua, that Messiah was indeed with them, leading them and guiding them every step of the way, just like we experience even to this day. The same rock Moshe smote. Yes, it's interesting when you think about it in that way, right? Because the Most High said for Moses just to speak to the rock, right? And then Moses has to, out of his, I would say out of his anger, strikes the rock. But even that, right? Even if we just think about the rock and water and food and things in the wilderness, Paul here is referencing these things. And what is it that we can actually learn from all of these things, right? What more do we need to do but to ask for the rock to produce water for us? If that's what the Most High said to do, what more should we be doing, right? This ends up being something for Moses that, caused him to not be able to go over into the promised land. The fact that he added to this command that the Most High said. And so again, when we just think about just a rock, right? It brings us back to these memories of these things that happen in the wilderness. And again, there are things that are supposed to be for our encouragement, for our enlightenment, so that we do not be ignorant. All right, keep on reading there. Verse 5.
However, with most of them, Elohim was not well pleased, for they were laid low in the wilderness. And these became examples for us, so that we should not lust after evil, as those indeed lusted.
Okay, very good. Verse 6 is really what we wanted to even get to place that. When we look back at the Torah, when we look back at the so-called Old Testament, these things that we see in the law of Moses, these things are examples for us, and they show us that we should not lust after evil, as those indeed lusted. We shouldn't do the things that they did, right? Yep. There was a lot that these people did in the wilderness. And by the way, Israel didn't have to be out of Egypt very long. If we look, the Exodus is Exodus chapter 13. By the time you get to 16 is where the manna commands are given, and there already we have complaining.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We're just out of Egypt, just into the wilderness, and there's already complaining. Right? 16, 17 chapter, we find the same thing. And so again, we were able to go back and look and see these examples of what we should not be doing, right? And again, when we go back to Numbers, this is a way that Moshe is using to remind the people that's going into the land that that they have to remember what their fathers have done, was the very reason that they're out there in the wilderness to begin with. Keep on going. Verse 7.
And do not become idolaters, as some of them.
Mm-hmm.
As it has been written, the people sat down to eat and drink and stood up to play.
Right. That's the golden calf. Golden calf situation in Exodus 32 and 6. All right, verse 8.
Neither should we commit whoring, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 fell. Neither let us try Messiah, as some of them also tried, and were destroyed by serpents.
Mm-hmm, very good. Most commentators agree that this actually should be 24,000 and not 23. But again, a lot of times when we look at these, these things, they're basing all these things off of memory. Nobody's walking around with their own personal Bibles. Mostly, these things are coming straight from the things that they remember. Okay, so again, we see all of these things that remind us of the failings and the shortcomings of the people. Again, and the reason is for our upliftment, so that we're able to look and see what they did, and then not do those things. Interestingly enough, when we look at the way in which Israel behaves in the scriptures, it seems as if we actually do see these things, these repeat offenses, these things that happen over and over again. But that doesn't stop the method in which we see scripture giving us these lessons, or causing for us to look back and to see where it is that these people made these various mistakes, so that you don't do the same thing. All right, read verse 10 and 11 there.
Neither grumble, as some of them also grumbled, and were destroyed by the destroyer. And all these came upon them as examples, and they were written as a warning to us, on whom the ends of the ages have come.
Yes, very good. So again, when we think about, this is interesting, because when we think about it's talking about the ends of the ages, right? Those people at that time thought that they were living in the end of the ages, but it kind of seems as if that's our reality, living in these end times, right? But these things that we look back and see are a warning for us, right? A warning for us. So let's go back to Numbers. Before we go back to 33, let's go back to 31 and verse 13.
It says, and Moshe and Eleazar the priest.
Hold on. I meant to say 32.
Oh, 32. Uh, 13, right?
Yeah.
And it says, so the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel, and he made them wander in the wilderness 40 years, until all the generation that had done evil in the eyes of Yahweh was destroyed.
All right, very good. So we see the reason again that the people were even in the wilderness to begin with was because of the people and their disobedience towards the Most High, the lack of faith that happened, right? And that they were going to be in the wilderness these 40 years until all the generation that had done evil in the eyes of Yahweh were consumed. And so in these 40 years, we see the wandering in the wilderness. The nuah, to waver, right? When we think about the idea of, up and down, to go up and down, to move about, to remove, to scatter. This is interesting that that this here word is used because you think about wavering, you think about something that's something that's going astray. But what happened with the people was that they were going astray and dying off. The Most High was really allowing for the people to manifest their true selves, which was a place of disobedience. But when you think about Israel, as a whole, and these parts being the people that died in the wilderness, you're thinking about the fact that Israel as a whole is being refined, right, in order to get from that place of servitude to Pharaoh to the place of servitude towards the creator and sustainer of all things. And so you needed for these people to be in this place where they moved to and fro, right, in the wilderness. The word wilderness there is midbar, which literally means to arrange. Hold on, let me make this bigger here. Midbar, the wilderness, means to arrange. We think of it as meaning words or word, which it does mean that. We see that there's speech. Speech is words, but the idea of arranging something. Well, midbar means to driving or the pasture. The root is to arrange, which is the bar, which is words. Midbar, comes from this word debar, which means to arrange. But this wilderness that they were in the wilderness is this place of confusion, right? It's this place of disarray. It's this place where things are, scattered all over the place. And so you have the people who went to and fro in this place that was, scattered all over the place, because of the fact that in their hearts they were scattered all over the place. They did not have a solid foundation in the Most High, which causes them to, be in the wilderness in the first place. And so the place that they were actually mirrored the hearts of the people. Right? This place that was desolate, right? That was dry, right? That was a place without water, a place that they, they're always out there looking for water, right? But they themselves lacked water, right? They were themselves dry places on the inside, right? In their hearts. And so the wilderness really exemplifies us on so many levels. Thinking about the fact that this place that the people were, this wilderness, this waterless place, caused these people this place that they were in, the wilderness, exemplified the people. The people lacked a faith in the people, in the Most High, and they lacked the ability to have faith and walk the way that the Most High had for them to walk, right? And so in their hearts was a wilderness, and they lived also in this wilderness, and they had to be consumed. They had to be consumed in the wilderness and not go into the land of promise, which was a land that was flowing with milk and honey. Right? The promised land was a place of abundance. Right? The promised land was a place where they found those grapes that people had to get together and carry out. Right? The big old clusters of grapes that men had to get together and carry. Right? So you think about the place where they were supposed to be, which was this this place that was full of growth and things growing all over the place. It was a place, a land of plenty. And then there's the wilderness, of course, that was this land that didn't have much. Right? It was this desolate place. But again, when we think about the things that this teaches us, what it taught Israel, or what it was supposed to be teaching Israel, was to be able to lean on the Most High for sustenance, right? To lean on the Most High for protection and all of the basic needs, right? And so again, when we look back at Numbers 33, the next chapter right over here that we're looking at, and Moses going back to the places where they were, again, this is just a way to cause the people to remember the greatness of the Most High. I mean, if you just think about verse 3 over here. He mentions it. It's just this passing thing. Verse 3. Read verse 3 again.
So they departed from Ramesses in the first new moon, on the 15th day of the first new moon. On the morrow of the Pesach, the children of Israel went out with boldness before the eyes of the Mitzrites.
I mean, this is the Passover. This is deliverance from Egypt.
Yep.
This is, Israel coming out from under Pharaoh, who had Israel in slavery for hundreds of years. And this is the end of that. And then we just see, it's just, when it was, the first new moon on the 15th day of the first month that they came out with boldness, right? But there's a lot to think about when you think about the Exodus from Egypt, right? Mm-hmm. And mostly what it is to think about is the actual might and power of the Most High. Okay? When we think about the fact that, many times we see the Most High, even when he, describes himself, he gives you this accolade, this thing that he did for his people, delivering Israel from Egypt with a strong hand. He's showing you, he's reminding us of his might and his power. It's so important for us to understand and realize and remember, and always keeping on the forefront of our minds the might and the power of our Elohim.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When we understand the might and power of our Elohim, how can we become discouraged when things happen around us? When we know who our Father is, when we know what he's capable of doing, how are we able to be discouraged? We can't be discouraged when we know that we are following after the creator and sustainer of all things. Right? There's nothing that's more powerful than he. And so, again, we see this method being used by the Most High through Moses to remind the people where they had been. Remind the people what they had been through. What it is that the Most High has done for the people. Oh, by the way, he didn't leave it. He didn't leave the whole thing out, right? Read verse 4 again.
And the Mitzrites were burying all their firstborn.
That got killed by the Most High, first of all.
Yeah, but Yahweh had struck in among them.
It says it right there. Okay, go ahead.
Also on their mighty ones, Yahweh had executed judgments.
Okay, so this idea that the Most High executed judgments against these false gods.
Mm-hmm.
These false gods that that these people had and reverenced and looked to, the Most High executed judgments, it said, against their mighty ones. And so again, these things that are exemplifying the power, the might of the Most High. All right, let's go over to I want to go over to Exodus 19. I was just thinking about the might and the power of Elohim. Read verse 4.
Says, And now, if you diligently obey my voice...
Hold on, read verse 4.
Oh, I said, you have seen what I did to the Mizrahites and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself.
Okay, very good. And so, when you think about, this is interesting because, in some ways, you have to, watch National Geographic to understand the figurative language that the Most High is using. Because, he says over here things like how I bore you on eagle's wings. Is that just to say that eagles got big wings? That he's able to carry things? Like what do that even mean to even say that when you think about that? But when you think about what the eagle watches over its young in a way which it flies under them. It flies under them, when it leads them from their nest, because when the little baby eagle, when it falls, it could fall down on the rocks and just die because they hang out up high. But if the eagle, the adult eagle, flies under the baby eagle, is able to catch then the baby eagle when it's unable to fly properly. And so we can see the loving kindness of the Most High, if we could just even understand how the eagles work, right? Because the eagle was this protection for the baby eagle, just like the Most High was a protection for Israel. And so when we look over here, there's a lot involved in this this figurative language that we see again, that the Most High kind of references back to in Numbers chapter 33, in the fact of the Most High bringing out his people Israel. But also, I want to look at this over here, Deuteronomy 32 and verse 10. Read verse 10 right there.
He found him in a wilderness and in a wasted, howling desert. He encompassed him. He made him understand. He watched over him as the apple of his eye.
Oh, just read 11 too. I ain't even
as an eagle stirs up its nest, flutters over its young, spreading out its wings, taking them up, bearing them on its wings.
Okay, very good. But I really want to look at verse 10 over here, because when we think about this this idea of, again, this wilderness, this howling, this wasted, howling desert, right? We see that, the Most High led his people through the desert. He instructed his people in the desert, and he kept his people as the apple of his eye. Right? Let's look at this. Because this is how the Most High deals with his people. Right? They always accused the Most High of bringing the people out into the desert so that they can die. Right? They brought these false accusations against the Most High. But this is what we know that the Most High actually did for Israel as a whole in the wilderness, was to lead them and instruct them and keep them. Right? he said, this verse says encompassed him. Interesting. Some translations, like King James, says that he led him. Verse 10 in the scriptures says he encompassed them. This word here is sabab. Sabab. To revolve or surround. Well, we see the idea of encompassing here, right? If we have the floor plan, which is the bait, the floor plan, which is the bait, that's doubled up the house, right? This, the samek is it's thorns that surround, right? So if we have that protective covering around the house, that does give you the idea of surrounding, right? And that protective covering, if you're on the inside and you bump up against the fence, it's going to hurt. Mm. And that's what happened. And, it killed Israelites that was on the inside, bumping up against the boundaries of the Most High. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that this fence of thorns actually did was keep out, those that would hurt and destroy the people. And so we have to think about the fact that the Most High, even though, going up against the Most High, of course, is a bad idea, but he keeps the bad things out. He is a protector of his people, right? Mm-hmm. And he not only surrounds or encompasses his people, but he made for Israel to be able to understand, right? He instructed, right? He's to separate mentally or distinguish, right? When you think about the idea of separating something mentally, right? I'm breaking the thing down into its parts. I'm able to fully understand this thing because I've broken it down into its various parts. I understand it, right? And that's what we're talking about here. This instruction that the Most High gives to his people, right? He didn't leave things up to interpretation. He let the people know what it is that he wanted for his people to be doing so that we could do it or not do it. Mm-hmm. Right? And so, when we look over here and we think about, again, the character of the Most High and the way in which he operates, he leads us, right? He surrounds us. He makes a place for us to be able to be protected from those things that can hurt us, that are from the outside. But at the same time, that border, that fence, that thing that surrounds, that it keeps us in, right? It keeps us where we need to be at, right? Mm-hmm. Again, this is the love of the Most High that's exemplified by the Almighty towards his people. And again, we just see this just by looking back and looking at the places where Israel went to, right? The fact that he went, we read all the way up to 15 where we get to Sinai. Mm-hmm. The Most High meets Israel and speaks to his people with his own voice. And they heard the voice of the Most High with their own ears. Okay? And so we see all these things happening when we think about the life of Israel in the wilderness. But again, in chapter 32, it says over here again that he encompassed Israel Israel was made to understand him. He watched over Israel, kept his people, right, to guard, to protect, to maintain the people as the apple of his eye. As the apple of his eye. That's interesting there when we think about the apple of his eye. This word here is Ishon. Ishon, right? Which literally is little man. Ishon is literally little man. Ish, you see Ish right there. Ishon, right? The little man of the eye, or the pupil, or the ball, right? And so when we think about the eye, you know, this most delicate part of the eye is that little pupil part inside of it, right? That's the most delicate part of it. And so when we think about this idea of the apple of the eye, it's speaking more of about an eye than it is an apple, right? It's not that the Most High loved apples, right? It's that he loved the little man that he created. And he loved this picture of the little man in the eye, this delicate thing that is susceptible to light. This apple of the eye, this little man in the eye, this pupil thing, you know, it regulates light into you know, through your eyes, right? Your eyeball, right? The pupil part, when it gets big and little, you know, it's letting light in, right? The Most High, who is the Father of light, right? He speaks about his people as the apple of his eye, this thing that kind of connects us to him, right? The place that he goes through, the place that the Most High goes through from a figurative perspective is your eye, right? The Most High, I mean, Yeshua talks about those that have an eye to see and ears to hear, right? When we sit up here and we talk about, you know, being able to see, you know, from a spiritual perspective, right? And so this vital place, this eye, the apple of the eye, is a very integral part of our situation here. Let's look at this verse here. Proverbs. What's Proverbs 20, verse 20 say?
20. It says, whoever curses his father or his mother, his lamp is put out in darkness.
His lamp is put out in deep darkness. This is here. His lamp is put out in obscure darkness. But look, this is our word right here. Ishon, the little man of the eye. This person who curses his father or his mother, his lamp is put out in deep darkness. His little man is shut. Right? His little man is closed. Right? The most intricate and delicate part of the man, the apple of his eye, is closed. Right? And so we see that kind of exemplified there in Proverbs 20 and 20 there. Okay, so again, when we look at this chapter, it's going over the journeys, right? It's going over the high points and the low points that we see in Israel in the wilderness. as they journeyed from there, as they camped in this place, as they journeyed from that place and they camped in the next place, right? Again, all of these things to cause us really to remember what went on in the wilderness, but not only just that, but for the purposes of causing us to be able to be prepared to go into the kingdom. Right? We have to understand that this wilderness experience that we are going through should be preparing us to go into the promised land. Right? Just like Israel out in the wilderness, there were many that died. But again, when we looked over the numbers, we saw that the end number that goes into the land is basically just a little bit smaller than the one, the original number. In other words, the main part of Israel really was maintained. There were some things that needed to come off that died. When you think about all that did die, it's a huge number. But when you think about the amount that came out, that went into the wilderness, and the amount that came out of the wilderness, the number was essentially the same. And so, but the fact is that there had to be a change. There had to be a transformation that happened in the wilderness. And so let's go back to Numbers 33. Let's go back to Numbers 33 and drop down some. We read down to 15. This is up to Sinai. Again, when we think about going to Sinai, we're talking about the idea of going to the place where the commandments were given, right? We talk about the place of the Most High making a covenant with his people. And then let's start reading, drop down to 41. Let's go down to 41, right? Because when we look over here, this is what we have, right? Departed from this place, camped at this place. Departed from this place, and camped at this place. If you wanted to do a comprehensive look at chapter 33, what you would do was try to look and see where these places are, right? And other places where they are mentioned in the scripture, to see what instances, what circumstances and situations surrounded these places that they were. But we're going to drop down here to start reading at verse 41. Because again, it's interesting that this wandering that the people did in Israel, in the wilderness, the fact that they kind of just went from place to place, they could have went from A to B, from technically speaking, but since the Most High had basically forbid them to go into the land, all they were able to really do was, just wander, just to go from place to place. And if you're living this kind of this life of they were they had animals, right? They had all these animals that graze, right? And they, just by nature, they eat a bunch of stuff in the one place, and then they got to go to another place, right? And so you can only take these animals so far before you got to move. Otherwise, if you go out 20 miles, you got to come back 20 miles.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That's 40 miles. Right? And so you can only take these animals so far. And so their life was basically, live as long as you can live in this particular area, then you got to move. And so that's what we see over here. But again, during all of these times, all of these different things were happening. But again, when we think about the idea of preparation for the promised land, preparing, I want to just look at a few more of these verses here, but let's just start reading at 41 just so we can move into it.
Says, so they departed from Mount Hor and camped at Salmonah. And they departed from Salmonah and camped at Punan. And they departed from Punan and camped at Oboth. And they departed from Oboth and camped at Abarim, at the border of Moab. And they departed from Iyim. Is that an L?
I don't know what that is. Hold on.
Yeah, it is an L.
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay. Lim and camped at Dibon Gad. And they departed from Dibon Gad. Oh, wait. Iyim. Oh.
No, it's an I.
Okay. Iyim and camped at Dibon Gad. Okay. And they departed from Dibon Gad and camped at Almon Dibathema. And they departed from Almon Diblathema and camped in the mountains of Abarim before Nebo. And they departed from the mountains of Abarim and camped in the desert plains of Moab by the Jordan of Jericho. And they camped by the Jordan from Beth Yeshimoth as far as the Abel Shittim in the desert plains of Moab. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe in the desert plains of Moab by the Jordan of Jericho, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, When you have passed over the Jordan into the land of Canaan, then you shall drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, and shall destroy all their engraved stones, and shall destroy all their molded images, and lay waste all their high places. And you shall possess the land and dwell in it, for I have given you the land to possess. And you shall divide the land by lot as an inheritance among your clans. To the larger you give a larger inheritance, and to the smaller you give a smaller inheritance. Wherever the lot falls to anyone, that is his. You inherit according to the tribes of your fathers. And if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall be that those whom you let remain shall be pricks in your eyes and thorns in your sides, and they shall trouble you in the land where you dwell. And it shall be that I do to you as I thought to do to them.
Okay, very good. So, when we see that, again, the Most High causing Israel to remember the place where they came from, remember the journey, remember the back and the forths and the comings and the goings of all that Israel had went through in this in their travels. He's also preparing them for what they would have to do, as the final preparations to to inhabit the land, right? And he said that when they go in there, that you need to drive out. You need to drive out all the inhabitants of the land from before you, right? Which is an interesting thing because, when we think about this from a spiritual perspective, it's something that, is important for us when we, do have our crossover experience, when we have our transition experience, is that this is not a passive transition that we make from going from being part of the Most High and His people, and from not being His people to being His people. When we think about the idea of driving out these people, this is something that is something that is intentional, right? You're intentionally removing yourself from all of these ways and things that these ways and things that are connected to these other peoples, right? From a physical perspective, he said to drive those people out and destroy all the remnants of the peoples, right? Destroy their figured stones, destroy their molten images, destroy their high places. When we think about, the time that we're in on today, and the way in which people, have this idea of a mixture of things in connection with the devotion to the Most High, these things are foreign to the Almighty. These things are foreign to His will and His ways. He don't like for His people to, offer their devotion in a way that the nations offered their devotion. We can't take the ways that are connected to pagan worship and these Gentile-ish ways. We can't take those ways and intermix them with the ways of the Most High. And so when he said to go into the land, all and do what he said to do. He didn't say go in there and then take the things that they're doing and then add them and mix them into what I said for you to do. He said to go in there and to drive out, occupy, consume, dispossess those places, right? And to destroy, right? That word destroy means to break, right? To cause to perish, to make undone, right? And so when they went over there and they saw their little idols and their little things, what they call them, their figured stones, their molten images, and their high places, they were supposed to go in there and make them be nothing. They were supposed to destroy those things and break them down. And so, we could think about that from a perspective of now is that, when we come out of, this false religion, which is false, right? When we come out of these ideas that aren't biblically connected to the Most High, we have to take those ideas and destroy those ideas. We have to take those things that we can see originate from pagan worship and destroy those ideas. Because when we mix them together, when we mix these things together, we're basically it ruins the whole thing. I mean, just from a physical standpoint, if I have a former woman that I was with, and we had a favorite song, and we had a favorite place that we went to go eat at or something like that, and then now I don't have her anymore. I got this new one. But I try to put my old favorite song onto the new one, and try to make the old favorite place that we used to eat be our favorite place. Like, I'm still really thinking about the old one, really.
Yeah, you ain't moved forward.
I'm just trying to keep the things the way they used to be with somebody different. But that's the same thing we do when we sit up here and take these things that didn't have nothing to do with the Most High. But now that we found out who He is, but we still want to maintain the way in which we worship our false gods before that. You can't. In fact, He didn't even leave it up to your imagination. He said, don't do it. In fact, destroy those things. Demolish them. So that you're able to take possession of the land and live in it. Right? This was kind of the prerequisite to take a possession of the land and living in it, was destroying these things and ways of the people that was there, the Canaanites.
I think in Hebrew it says, lay aside every weight and sin that so easily beset you.
Yeah. What verse is that?
Hebrews 12:1.
I mean, because this is something that we have to, because again, we're talking about going into the land. 12:1?
Yep.
We're talking about going into the land. What'd that say? 12. Hold on. Let me make it big here. What that first verse say right there?
First one says, we too, then having so great a cloud of witnesses all around us, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily entangles us.
This is so powerful. Oh, go ahead, finish.
And let us run with endurance the race set before us.
Because in the context of this, verse 11, chapter 11, it gives you all of the, the different patriarchs and their faith. So seeing the faith of the forefathers that came before you, when you look at that and you see all that cloud of witnesses that you see all around us, when you see all the things that they already did by faith, he said, there's something that always causes you to sin, that entangles you. He said you're supposed to lay that thing aside. He didn't say try to lay it aside. He didn't say this thing is something that you're going to struggle with for the rest of your life. He didn't say that. He said let us lay aside every weight and sin. So he wants you to lay aside the sin and the thing that's just a burden to you. It don't even got to be a sin. It's just a weight that you always get tied up in. And the reason why you're supposed to be able to do it is because you're able to look back and see that the forefathers did it before you. That's what we're talking about. Moses sat up here and he gave these, he wrote down the journeys of the people and he showed what the people done went through before they went into the land so that they could get ready to go into the land. And he's saying to the people, he said this basically: lay down all the sin and the weight that so easily besets you, and run with endurance the race that's set before you.
And just think about all of the things that Moses gave up to run the race. He gave up the pleasures of Pharaoh, the wealth, the riches,
All that for his
he gave
people.
it all up.
For his people, he had Moshe had a mind for his people. When he first left from out of there, he realized who he was, and then he realized that he was the same as the people that was sitting over there, being mistreated by the Egyptians, which caused him to sit up there and act as a judge and the jury for him. But you know, the thing is that, you know, he was part of that life. And he said, I would rather go over here and, you know, kill these people rather than stand by and just enjoy the comforts that I currently enjoy, because I have such a heart for the people. And so when you think about what that takes to be able to say, not my will, but thy will. It don't matter about what it is that is pleasing necessarily to me and what I want to be doing, but what is it that you would have for me to be doing? I'm sure that when we think about some of these things that Israel might have got themselves into in terms of these pagan customs, from a physical standpoint, they probably could have been something that was physically pleasurable. And so it's not as if these people were sitting up here, you know, indulging in these non-pleasurable things. Like, when you think about we always do things that's fun that don't got nothing to do with what the Most High has for us to be doing. And I'm sure all of those things were that. That's why they were so appealing to the people. Man, look at what them people doing over there. We sitting up here doing all this stuff. We could be doing that over there. I could be sitting up here wrapping up gifts and receiving gifts from people right now. They're a little fun. I got all these kids over here, and I'm gonna make them miss out on Miss. That's child abuse. That's what people look at, these things that are outside of the will of the Most High. Like you hurting somebody.
Right. People say to me all the time, Didn't you get Christmas?
Yeah.
You gonna deny your kids, but you got Christmas.
That's so crazy. We got so many holidays that are so amazing.
Yep.
We don't need these little holidays that these people got anymore. We don't need them. Ours are way better.
Especially when you know what their holidays are about.
Especially that.
It's wicked.
But if we just thought about it on the surface level,
right? Yeah.
if we just looked at it just on the surface level, like, our things is way better than those things. But people don't understand that. All they see is what they missing out on, quote unquote. But the Most High said, when you come into me, when you come to receive the blessings that I prepared for you, you got to destroy all of those things. You got to get rid of all of those things so that we're able to, live together like the way that we had, like I had for you to do. What does this say over here? Self-assessment and reflection on the word is what it takes to see what the high places, weights, idols, and thorns are that slow and stagnate progress in Yah's way. And when you think about what it is that the Most High is doing by calling Israel to look back at where they were, is to be able to look at themselves. Right? This is what we have to be doing, the same thing that they did. To be able to look back at ourselves, to see where it is that the Most High has brought us from, all the things that He took us through. Because sometimes until we sit back and think about what it is that the Most High has already done for us, we might forget about some things. Mm-hmm. We might leave some things off the list that He did for us that you don't even think about. But again, preparing the people for going into the land of promise. This is part of of that process. Is looking back and seeing what the Most High already did. All right, let's go back over here to Numbers. Read again 55 and 56.
And if you do not drive out the inhabitants of the land from before you, then it shall be that those whom you let remain shall be pricks in your eyes and thorns in your sides. And they shall trouble you in the land where you dwell. And it shall be that I do to you as I thought to do to them.
I was looking at some of this stuff, right? We talked about the importance of the eye, right? And how delicate that eye is. And when the Most High talks about the apple of His eye, He talks about the fact of protecting that little eye pupil, because it's so delicate in there, right? That little Ishon, right? But when you think about also this thorns in your sides, right? It's interesting when you think about these people in old times where you wasn't getting no major operations and things. That if you got something that like poked inside of you, so like you wasn't going to the emergency room to have it removed necessarily. That thing might just be in you. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so when we think about a thorn in your side, it's kind of euphemistic of thinking about when you have this thing that gets in you, that's painful, that hurts, that could potentially be killing you, and it's not going to come out very easily. It might not come out. So when you think about a thorn in the side, we think about like, walking through the where the sticker balls be at. You know what I mean? Sticker balls could be, something that's, I got sticker balls in my afro when I was a kid, and that's a terrible thing. That's a terrible thing to happen, right? But over time, it could get out. But some of these things, when you deal with some of these, when you out in the wilderness, we live city life. When you out in the wilderness and you come across some big old, here, let me put this thing over here. When you come across this big old thorn that's inches long, and that thing get in you, getting that thing out could be a problem. And so again, this is just a picture now of what problems you be creating for yourself if you don't remove these things that are connected to these pagan inhabitants of the land. If you don't remove them and you allow them to remain, they're going to end up being at the least always painful for you, and at the most killing you. If you let them remain, let me see what that word is. If you let them yathar, to jut over or exceed, to excel. This is not even to, because we really read it in the English, and it's just like if you let them stay there. But if they stay there, they're going to excel and grow. They're not just going to stay the way that they are whenever you meet them. They're going to become more than that. They're going to excel and take over. That's what happens. Who's the people that was able to combine wickedness and righteousness together, and they was able to be forever in a neutral zone?
Nobody.
I don't know who that is. You just end up being wicked.
Mm-hmm. Or the righteous supposed to fight back, and it's a constant battle. They both can't be there.
You can't argue about the same space. It's just like
light and darkness.
It's just like light and darkness. They can't argue. Either you got one or the other. Where light is, it wipes out the darkness. Or if it's weak light, then it still stay dark.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But you can't, it's not, you don't have, like, if I turn the light on, there's not a line.
Right.
There's not a line where the darkness, there's always that mixture.
But if you look, you can see like darkness behind the cracks.
It's over there. It's
like,
over there. Shadows and stuff, where the place where the light can't get to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But it shouldn't be out in the open.
You got to illuminate the whole thing.
Yeah.
You got to illuminate the whole situation.
Yeah.
What does it say? I had a paper cut on my eye before and couldn't see or effectively use my eye for a full week. It didn't even take a thorn. I mean, a thorn, that's a terrible thing, a thorn, right? But just a little cut on the eye. That eye is so serious. It's so serious. And so the thought over here is that you're gonna remove the possibilities for there to be something to get in the eye, or to be a thorn that's in the side. If I'm coming through, I'm taking out all the sticker ball bushes first. So I gotta sit up there and deal with them things no more. But if you leave them there, they're gonna just grow and take over. There ain't nothing worse. I used to have the most wonderful grass back there. But now I got all kind of crabgrass. I used to love just to take my shoes off and walk in my grass. That stuff was like some carpet or something out there. Now I got that little crabgrass stuff in there. That stuff is like,
Oh yeah.
that stuff ain't no joke.
Yeah.
But it don't just stay in its own little spot.
No.
It just grows out and spreads. But that's what he talking about over here. But he talking about this sinful pagan practices that in order for us to be able to go and be in the land the way that he will have for us to be, we got to get that stuff up out of there. Because verse 56, he said, and it shall be that I do to you as I thought to do to them. You gonna get, he made, when we talk about the fact of, when we talk about the lake of fire, when we talk about everlasting punishment, that lake of fire was made for the devil. But you think that just because it was made for somebody in particular, that somebody who it wasn't made for ain't gonna wind up there?
It talks about hell enlarging itself to accommodate.
Oh my goodness. That's terrible. But it's true. And it didn't even just begin. He been said it. If you can't get yourself, this is what it said in the Cliff Notes version. If you can't get yourself together, then you gonna get what I made for them. That's what's gonna happen, right? And I mean, that's what did happen.
Yep.
And so, he said that, his people, he was going to utterly destroy because of disobedience. We sitting over here today, to this day, in the situation that we in, just even right now, because people wasn't able to not think about these verses right over here in Numbers chapter 33. In terms of annihilating and destroying these things that's connected to these false gods and idols. And so when we think about the wilderness, right? When we think about the wilderness and the things in the wilderness, there's things in the wilderness that we see, the ways that the Most High moves and operates, that causes us to think about things that's connected to the Most High. We're able to see his strength and his might when we look at what he did in the wilderness. We're able to see his protection. We look and see what he did in the wilderness. We look and see that they was in the wilderness for 40 years. And then in Deuteronomy 8:8 talks about them having the same shoes and the same clothes that they had whenever they went in. I got this towel from, it got to be from the 80s. I don't use it. It's just like something that I have that was my dad's. This towel. It was this big, huge, like beach towel it was like super thick. But if you felt that thing right now, it's like it's so thin, and it's tethered, like it's parts of it's ripped up. Like I don't use it. I have it like stuffed away somewhere. But from the 80s, right? It's probably 30 something years old, right? This towel, and it been messed up. Like it's in bad shape, and it been in bad shape. But you talking about 40 years in the desert of use, where they didn't have multiple changes of clothes, shoes and clothes, and they still got the same. If I wore the same shoes, I basically got to get a new pair of work boots every year. Shoes that I wear every day.
Every 6 months for me.
Every 6 months.
Every 6 months. Mm-hmm.
The months last a little longer than 6 months, but
We'll see. I
Years.
be pushing 1 ton. Jacob been going out with me and that stuff heavy.
He putting that work in.
So you pushing it, you need traction. I be killing them shoes.
Yeah. And so imagine 40 years though. You walking in the wilderness, in the desert, rocky, muddy, dirty, sandy, whatever it is, all that for 40 years. The shoes didn't wear out. That's the Most High's protection. That's His provision over His people.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, on the way into the land of promise, He's saying, look back at all those places where you was at. If I right now just think about a time that I was with this one or that one, I automatically think about what we was doing at that time. The memories that go along with just thinking about the places where you was at. We were just doing it the other night, talking about what years certain movies came out that you've seen at the movie theater. Right? You think about these things, but not only the things, but the place where you was at, at that particular time. And so when we think about what the Most High commanded for the Almighty to do in terms of talking about the journeys through the wilderness, it causes us to think about the things that the Most High is for His people. Right? We're able to see the Most High's grace out here in the wilderness. Because He could have just said, I don't need to deal with you if you're going to sit up here and do me like this. He could have really said that. He could have just took one of them and just been like, I'm just going to keep you, and the rest of them, all of them, I'm going to kill. Because you're the only one that's worth it. But instead of doing that, He kept the people. Right? That's His grace. So we see all these things when we just think about the places that Israel was at in the wilderness.
You think about like the feasts that we've had, like, what we was doing, who was there.
I know. You could sit up here and talk about
weather.
different locations, and it caused me to think about highlights or lowlights of a particular place. I remember the last time we was out at the at that place in Ligonier, and it literally was snowing outside. And the guy that came to keep the feast with us he was from up north somewhere in Michigan or something, one of them northern states, Midwest states, had a tent, and it wasn't even like a tent that you buy at the store. It was like some thick canvas tent that he made. Like he literally made a tent out of like canvas and 2x4s. Out in the snow.
He came with his tools and put that thing together.
Yeah. Well, he had a basic. I guess he had a blueprint or whatever.
I like it.
But he put it together, and it snowed.
Before I forget.
And he didn't even come inside in the snow. He stayed out there.
But wait, soon as sunset on the last great day, he came inside.
I mean, he came inside and hung out with us, but I'm saying as far as sleeping,
He
the
wasn't
coldest
out there.
the coldest parts of the nights,
He was out there.
he was in his tent.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just saying that these looking back at what at what not only what we seen what Moses does in terms of going through these journeys, but also what we see what the writer of Hebrews is the same thing in terms of looking back to see what it is that the people did before us, so that we're able to know that we're able to do the same thing. We're able to do it. And it's not something that we have to sit up here and kind of, we don't got to be, of the mind frame that, we got to always sit up here and struggle with this or that. We need to have, you need to be having new struggles. If you got the same old struggles, you ain't doing something right.
Yeah.
You might be always struggling, but you shouldn't be always struggling with the same things. I mean, you got to have some new things that happen, not the same old things, right? And so that's what this helps for us to see. I wanted to look over real quick and I wanted to look over at Acts, because the same thing that Moses does, the same thing that we see Moses does with the people, is the same thing that we see with Acts that Stephen does. Let's go to Acts chapter 6 real quick. Let's see here. Acts chapter 6. It's already in verse 8 there.
And Stephen, filled with belief and power, did great wonders and signs among the people. And some of those of the so-called congregation of freedmen, Syrians, Alexandrians, and those from Cakia, and Asia rose up disputing with Stephen. But they were unable to resist the wisdom by the Spirit by which he spoke. Then they instigated men to say, "We have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moshe and Elohim." And they stirred up the people and the elders and the scribes. So they came upon him, seized him, and brought him to the council. And they set up false witnesses who said, "This man does not cease to speak blasphemous words against the set-apart place and the Torah. For we have heard him saying that this Yeshua of Nazareth shall overthrow this place and change the institutes which Moshe delivered unto us." And all who sat in the council, looking steadily at him, saw his face was like the face of a heavenly messenger.
Okay, let's just start here and work backwards. When we see here, it says all who sat in the council and looked at him saw his face, and it was like a heavenly messenger. So the council heard what it is that these people were saying, but it seemed like it was hard to believe what they were saying based on looking at the person. But when you look at this is verse 11, that these people was instigated. Then they instigated men to say this right here. "We have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moshe and Elohim." But that was a lie, though.
They didn't like hearing it.
But they never heard it, though. They instigated men to say it.
Yeah.
Same thing they do to this day.
They never heard them saying the things, right? But they stealthily, to throw in stealthily, to introduce collusion, suborn. They made it up. They made up false accusations against him.
But go up one verse. A little bit
10?
more. Go up a little bit more. Okay, there. Well, verse 8. That's where he was filled with pride, did great wonders among the people. So the people.
Yeah.
Anytime you get some spotlight, I'm like, oh, who's this dude over here?
Yeah. The
Doing
people
something.
seen what he was doing.
Yeah.
But I'm saying that the accusations that they had against him was unfounded.
Mm-hmm.
And then even the council was looking like he looked like he looked like a heavenly messenger. But all of the witnesses that they set up, and they set up these false witnesses, they all said that this man does not cease to speak blasphemous words against a set apart place in the Torah. But that all was a lie, though. And so when we look over in the next chapter where Stephen has what he has to say about it, he goes down and starts talking the Torah to these people that said he didn't speak the Torah, that he spoke against it. Here, read some of this. Start reading here at just start reading right there at verse 1.
It says, and the high priest said, is this so? And he replied, men, brothers, and fathers, listen. The Elohim of esteem appeared to our father Abraham when he was in Aram Naharaim, before he dwelt in Haran, and said to him, come out of your land and from your relatives, and come here into a land that I shall show you. Then he came out of the land of the Kasdim and dwelt in Haran. And from there, after the death of his father, he removed him to his land in which you now dwell. And he gave him no inheritance in it, not a foot of it. But he promised to give it to him for possession and to his seed after him, when as yet he had no child.
Let's drop down. Let me drop down to 35, because all he doing is talking Torah. That's all he doing right here. All this stuff he's saying is what is saying the so-called Old Testament, the thing that he's sitting up there saying that they're falsely saying that he don't do. But start reading at 35.
This Moshe whom they had refused, saying, we made you a ruler and a judge. This one Elohim sent to be a ruler and a deliverer by the hand of the messenger who appeared to him in the bush. This one led them out, and after he had done wonders and signs in the land of Mitzrayim and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness 40 years, this is the Moshe who said to the children of Israel, Yahweh Elohim shall rise up for you a prophet like me from your brothers. Him you shall hear. This is he who was in the assembly in the wilderness with the messenger who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers who received living words to give to us. Unto him our fathers will not become obedient, but thrust away, and in their hearts they turned back to Mitzrayim, saying to Aaron, make us mighty ones to go before us. For this Moshe who led us out of the land of Mitzrayim, we do not know what has become of him. And they made a calf in those days and brought an offering to an idol, and were rejoicing in the works of their own hands. So Elohim turned and gave them up to worship the hosts of the heaven, as it has been written in the book of prophets. Did you bring slaughtering beasts and offerings unto me during 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? And you took up the tent of Molech and the star of your mighty one of Kiyun, images which you have to bow before them. Therefore I shall remove you beyond Babel. The tent of the witness was with our fathers in the wilderness, and he instructed Moshe to make it according to the pattern that he had seen, which our fathers, having received it in turn, also brought with Yehoshua into the land possessed by the nations, whom Elohim drove out before the face of our fathers until the days of David, who found favor before Elohim and asked to find a dwelling for the Elohim of Yaakov. And but Solomon built him a house. However, the Most High does not dwell in dwellings made with hands, as the prophet says. The heavenly is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. What house shall you build for me, says Yahweh? Or what is the place of my rest? Has my hand not made all these? You stiff-necked and uncircumcised and hardened ears, you always resist the set-apart spirit, as your fathers did, you also do, which the prophets did your fathers not persecute. And they killed those who before announced the coming of the righteous one, in whom you now have become the betrayers and murderers, who received the Torah as it was ordained by messengers, but did not watch over it. And hearing this, they were cut to their hearts and gnashed the teeth at him. But he, being filled with the set-apart spirit, looked steadily into the heaven and saw the esteemed Elohim and Yeshua standing at the right hand of Elohim. He said, "Look, I see the heavens open and the son of Adam standing at the right hand of Elohim."
All right, so all of the stuff that Stephen had to say, basically giving you a Cliff Notes version of the Bible, all the way up to David, and then up to Yeshua, and up to the way that the people treated the righteous one, who is Yeshua, in terms of being betrayers and murderers. These people, he gave them a history lesson, and then from hearing that, they got mad and killed them, stoned them to death. But they was already mad to begin with. They already had problems with him to begin with. But the thing is that what I wanted to really just bring out about it was the fact that all he did was talk to them about what the Most High did and the character of the Most High, and the things, the way in which the Most High operated, and showed the people themselves, basically, and showed the people, these wicked people, showed them themselves. And so they, being these people who were unable to really operate in, when you're not operating according to the Ruach HaKodesh, when people that are operating according to the Spirit are speaking or doing things, you can't see the right in it because you're not right. And so somebody with a genuine heart to serve after the Most High, if somebody brings out something that's that connects you, if somebody brings out something that connects me to idolatry, I'm either going to get mad and try to defend what I'm doing, or I'm going to look at what I'm doing and feel sorry and want to stop that and change my behavior. And so, but either way, it's like he's doing, this the connecting thing is that it seems to me that he's doing the same thing that Moses was doing with the people in terms of let's look at the record. Now you have the opportunity to either do what your forefathers have done and then end up the same way that they ended up, or you could do the opposite of what they did, which is what the Most High is saying for you to do, and live. And so these people could have had a whole other different kind of response.
Could have repented.
They could have looked and said, you know what? We acting up. We shouldn't be sitting up here looking at you and being jealous because we not doing the things that you could do. People not following after what we saying, they following after what you saying. I need to be more like the Most High. I need to be more like the Almighty and exhibit His character. They should have been doing that, but instead they just continued on with what they had already thought to do to begin with. They was trying to get the people to be on their side with what they was getting ready to do, just like what they did with Yeshua. That whole thing that had nothing to do with going through no court or nothing. It was just about getting everybody to get along with the idea that we about to kill this guy. Mm-hmm. We just want to get your permission to do it. Mm-hmm. Yes, it all depends on the condition of the heart. And these people had wicked hearts from the beginning. Their intentions started out wicked. And so, again, when we think about, this is the gospel over here. The gospel just shows you yourself through the mirror of, the character of the Most High. And either you look in that thing and deal honestly with what you see, or you walk away from the mirror and leave the dirt in your eyes and the stuff hanging out of your nose and just walk around like that. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're supposed to look in the mirror and get yourself together. Mm-hmm. Oh man, I got stuff on my face. Let me get that. Mm-hmm. Like from a natural perspective, that's what you do. Oh look. Let me get that off of there. Who looks at it and be like,
oh well,
that's just there.
Some people there.
That's me.
That's me.
That's what I look. That's just me.
I'm being me.
That's how I am. That's how I am.
Only God can judge me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But but you're right. It's about the heart condition, and you have to have a particular heart condition to be able to honestly look at what you're able to see in the mirror, in what it is that the Most High shows you, and turn away from that sin.
Hey man, Michael Jackson made a song about that. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. Mm-hmm. I'm asking him to change his ways. Mm-hmm. If you want to make a world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. Mike was spitting out here. Mike was out here.
Oh my goodness. That's Bible.
That's what got him killed when he started talking about the wicked. Yeah. These people are wicked. We're gonna put him to sleep.
And so that's funny. When you look at the overall picture of what happened with Israel as a whole, in terms of the condition of the heart of Israel, the wickedness needed to be purged from Israel. And he said, we gonna wander around in this wilderness until all the people that went against the Most High in their disobedience are dead. But again, That was the purification of the people. And so how much more so when we look to go into the land of promise, to step into the kingdom of Elohim, how much more so do we think that we have to be purified in this wilderness? You got these people sitting up here arguing with you about keeping the Shabbat in exile. Like these things is the most ridiculous things that I ever heard. But if we can't figure out how to worship the Most High before He return, it's gonna be too late. By the time He get back, he's picking up the people that's already following after Him.
Right.
In practice, not in theory.
Because He know that when that return happen and we get set right, He know that we ready to listen and do.
Yeah,
them people that still want to fight
doing it
and come up and make excuses, ain't gonna be no excuses.
No. I don't care who you is. If you want to sit up here and say, well, I'll act right whenever He get here. No, you ain't.
Yeah. Right.
I'm just going to say, no, you ain't going to act right. You going to be just who you is right now because you supposed to be experiencing this wilderness and having these things purged from your heart.
Yep.
That's what's happening right now. That don't happen whenever He get back. When He get back, he taking the people across. He taking the people who went through the wilderness. Those are the ones that's getting across. He's taking Israel that's been changed and transformed.
Right. It's the spirit. Like if you weren't working on your spirit, like we know we got a temple. We know our land's destroyed, but we still want to do what He said to do. That don't, and that
you
don't.
got to.
Yeah.
You got to do it. And so these are the things that we see over here when we look at these scriptures in the first place. The scriptures, we have to look at these things from a spiritual perspective and know that we are able to worship the Most High in a way that He's pleased with, in spite of the fact that we're not over there in the land.
Yeah.
But we need to be able to look at the fact that ancient Israel was put us in the position that we're in because of disobedience.
Right.
And so we're going to continue in disobedience and say because we're in exile we get a pass for our disobedience? That's folly.
I'm like, well, you can go ahead and do that. I'm not doing that.
And so, just kind of bringing this to a close, we want to be able to look at our our individual situations, and look at where He's brought us. The things that He's done, not only the examples that we could look back in the scriptures and see what He did for the people as a whole, but look back in your own life and see what He did for you, the way in which that He changed you and made you a new creation, so that you're able to move further still. Because we're always on this path, on this journey to make it to the land of promise, and we're forever growing into the image, more and more into the image of the likeness of His Son Yeshua, and we have to continue on this path of growth and moving forward and doing the things that the Most High will have for us to be doing, so that we don't become stagnant. Right? So, if He put that seed of the Spirit inside of us, He put it in there so that it could grow, so that we can grow into trees that bear forth fruit. And so He's given us all of these tools that help for us to be able to move forward and progress in this walk. And we just got to keep on walking, right? We got to keep on going and keep on being led by the Spirit and allowing the Spirit inside of us to flourish and grow and spread like a righteous plague all over the place.
Right.
All right. Okay. So that being said, does anybody have any last questions, comments before we done? Okay. So that being said, I want to remind everybody to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button, leave some comments down below. And y'all willing, next week we shall be back continuing with our look at the Torah. And let's say Shabbat Shalom. And let everyone have a blessed week.
Shalom.
Barcelona.
Shalom.